Hi and good morning, it's Jim from maverickstar Observatory. In this video we're going to be looking at the standard model of what these mainstream organisations are peddling with regards to what is actually causing climate change. And if you go on other websites, we're on Just Dig It at the moment. This is a website that is working in Africa at the moment. They're trying to make Africa greener because they know the benefits of changing the terraform in Africa from dusty unused land back into fertile green land. It has a lot of positive effects on the land, such as if you've got vegetation, the root system usually helps hold the water, as opposed to what's taking place with a lot of erosion that's taking place in Africa and other parts of the world. You get these big flash flood rainfalls, and it runs that fast off the land because there's no vegetation there for it to suck it back into the ground and hold it there. So what happens is a process called erosion. So it washes that topsoil off. By putting the plants back in the ground, you've got a root system that therefore transforms that rainwater into the soil. It's able to hold the water in the soil a lot longer, and because it's got a good root system in there, it prevents the water erosion, creating the problem. Well, probably was likely the cause of the problem in the first place. But I wanted to go into the standard model of what they say this is all taking place in the first place. So why is there global warming, and why then does it lead to climate change? And I say it's the standard model because wherever you go on all these websites, it's almost like they're singing from the same hymn sheet. So like for instance here we've got what is causing climate change. Changes in the climate are not something new. In the past, natural factors such as volcanic eruptions and El Niño caused fluctuations in temperature and rainfall. What is new is the influence of humans on climate change. We drive our cars, heating our homes when it's cold outside, and use energy to cook. These day-to-day activities cause the emissions of greenhouse gases such as methane and carbon. These gases prevent heat emitted by the earth from escaping, causing global warming. One thing they always seem to admit is the levels of water in our atmosphere, because if you compare in gigatons the levels of water in our atmosphere compared to the gigatons of carbon in our atmosphere, you would see that there is a massive difference in the two, that being that water is far more abundant in our upper atmosphere than CO2 is, and yet they fail to even mention that water is a greenhouse gas. Now they don't also mention and I know why this is. First of all, if we can blame it on a human problem, we can tax it, but if it's a natural problem, then we can't tax it. So it's clearly all about taxes. But what they don't realise is they're actually destroying the infrastructure, manufacturing, and the way we generate electricity on our planet. Because there's a lot of countries now that are moving all to renewable sources of energy, like wind turbine, hydro, and solar panels. The problem is with these is, as we saw in Texas again, I mentioned Texas a lot this week in the videos, or should I say last week, is that when we have extreme conditions where we get a lot of snowfall in a short space of time, it prevents the wind turbines producing electricity because the blades freeze. And of course, if you cover snow all over a photovoltaic cell, it's not going to be able to absorb solar radiation, so it's not going to work. What are they expecting us to do? Put up with more power cuts in the future for the sake of raising a few extra pounds in tax? I'm sure, and you'll agree with me on this, we all want reliable energy, And yes, we want to be able to heat our homes. We want to be able to drive our own cars to work. And, you know, if you really look into it, how much it costs the power station to produce enough electricity for you to charge your car, you'll see that it costs more in energy terms than what the actual fuel burned in a combustion engine would be in any case. You know, I really don't know how we are going to deal with these people, because they're not even listening. They have their hymn sheet, which is in front of us right now, and they are sticking to that hymn sheet and, you know, changing the world as a result of that. Like I say, we're on this website, which is trying to regreen, you know, large, vast parts of the earth. But if we just allow the carbon to increase a little bit more, we'll find that it will do that naturally in any case. If we look at, you know, satellite photos of the Sahara Desert over, you know, the last 30 years and then compare it to the last 5 years, you'll see that they're getting greener. And, you know, a greener environment means it'll encourage biodiversities of insects that will help break down the material in the soil, giving you a better quality soil. You know, these detritivores will break it down for you, and you'll have a good, healthy soil. And what is worse than, you know, what can be so bad and evil about making the world a greener place and providing habitats for all the other species? What could be a worse place or a worse thing to do? You know, let's look at the carbon cycle, because really it really isn't anything to do with human beings, the amounts of carbon in the atmosphere. And I've got to say this, if you compared how much the ocean puts out in CO2 as opposed to how much humans put out in CO2, you would find it would be on the scale of something like this. Humans put out 20 gigatons a year. I know the figures aren't completely correct, but you'll find that, you know, the scale difference is almost accurate, compared to the oceans putting out 8,000 gigatons. So there's our 20 gigatons compared to 8,000 gigatons, and that's just comparing two parts of the carbon cycle, and there are many parts of the carbon cycle. So it's insane. Have a look at this chart. So we're looking at atmospheric CO2 and the glacial cycles, and on the left hand column you can see it's measured CO2 in parts per million, and we are, from the last time I remember doing a CO2 reading for us in parts per million, around about 140 parts per million, give or take 10 either way. But you can see we have been at, you know, 780 parts per million over the last 650,000 years. And carbon does go up when temperature slightly goes up, and the reason for that is because when the oceans get a bit warmer, they release the carbon, and then when they start to cool down, they absorb the carbon. So, you know, our Earth is in perfect control of its CO2. You know, it regulates itself almost perfectly, much better than what humans could do. And yet, you know, they're saying it is a cause for us to change everything we go and do about our business in this modern world, because we are affecting climate change. And, you know, you can see there has been quite a few times in our history when carbon levels have been a lot higher than what they are today even. So how, first of all, if we've only been around for the last 42,000 years, you know, when the Neanderthals started to fade out, Homo sapiens, human beings, came on the scene around 40,000 years ago, or 42,000 years ago. How have we changed anything with regards to the levels of CO2? You know, if you go back 100,000 years, you can see that CO2 levels was above 270 parts per million. If you go really far back in our history, there was a point in time where the entire atmosphere was almost a concentration of CO2, and it was over millions and millions of years that the microbiorganisms in the oceans scrubbed all that CO2 out, and in that process started to respire oxygen. So our Earth has always had the ability to control levels of CO2, and yes, they do rise, and yes, they do fall, and it's perfectly natural at this point in time for the CO2 levels to be at what they are, and the input from human beings is really negligible here. Yet all these self-proclaimed top scientists paid the top bucks, getting the funding for their projects, are, you know, what a lot of people now are describing as climate what's the term? Well, they're just hyper, about the climate. I can't, but Tony Ella always goes on about the name. I can't even think of it. It's annoying. But, you get these people that hype the levels of CO2 and make it sound dramatic. And we're all going to die if we don't do something about it. Like that protesting group here in the UK, Extinction Rebellion. Yeah, that's what they call. That's what Tony Ella calls them, climate extremists, isn't it, or something like that. But there you go. My point is this: is that how are we going to deal with these people and these governments, because they don't seem to be changing the course of direction on this. They're still talking about global warming, and the result of that is because human beings have put too much emissions in the atmosphere since 1760, the Great Industrial Revolution, when it all began, apparently. And as a result of this, we have had money taken out of our pockets, and I get frustrated because there's a lot of the general public that don't even care. They're just too involved in their own business and their own lives to even care about such matters. And when somebody doesn't care, there's always going to be someone that takes advantage of that, and that is exactly what is taking place right now. We've got these climate alarmists saying that CO2 is a real big problem for us, when really the reality is it's a natural process. In most of our homes right now, even whilst I'm talking, the levels of CO2 is over 1,000 parts per million, and I'm not losing conscious, and I wouldn't lose conscious if it was at 3,000 parts per million. I wouldn't lose focus of what I'm talking about. I wouldn't lose conscious. I wouldn't feel giddy, nausea, or anything. But I tell you what, if our levels was at 2,000 parts per million outside, the only thing that would happen would be all the vegetation on our planet would thrive a lot more than what it is right now.